Hi, folks. Welcome if you're just joining us. So why don't we go ahead and get started because we do have a packed agenda today and we are super excited that you're here. So yeah, feel free to have your video on if you like. We're going to ask you to stay muted just so that we cut out any background noise. But depending on how big the group gets toward the end after we do some breakout rooms, we may have some informal conversation. Hi, Heidi. Hi, Daniel. So my name's Jennifer Wilhelm. I'm a research and network coordinator with the New Hampshire Food Alliance and a small scale fruit and vegetable grower in the Seacoast. I'm excited to be here with Hanna and Becky and Jermaine, and they will each introduce themselves in a moment. So if you're just joining us, feel free to put your contact information, I keep saying that, your name and affiliation or location in the chat. And I'm going to turn it over to Hanna and we'll get rolling.
Thanks, Jennifer. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming in on this super sunny, awesome day to be in the session. It's so nice out there. My name's Hanna Flanders. I am the Director of Community Engagement for the Kearsarge Food Hub. We're a nonprofit organization based in Bradford, which is Kearsarge, like Lake Sunapee, central New Hampshire region. We're working to reinvigorate our community within a restorative local food system. We do food production on a small farm. We have a year-round local market, Sweet Beet Market. We do educational programming, food donations, and food system networking like this so that we can kind of learn and share and grow together within the state of New Hampshire.
Becky?
And I'm Becky Colpitts. I'm from the Littleton Food Co-op up in the North Country above the notch. We are here in New Hampshire. And I'm the community outreach coordinator there. I'm so happy to be here, even though the sun's shining outside. It's just coming in on me.
Thanks, Becky. Jermaine?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jermaine Moore. I'm based in Elliott, Maine. My company is called the Mars Hill Group, and I partner with organizations and corporations to really help advance diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And I'm just so excited to be here today. I share knowledge and partner with you all.
Great, thank you so much. So Hanna is gonna take over and cover our desired outcomes for this session, and then we'll get into a little bit about why are we talking about racial equity in our food systems work.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been coming together over the past few weeks to decide exactly what we're trying to get out of this session together. And so those desired outcomes include creating relationships and connections that are strengthened throughout the network, as well as within sub-state regional communities. A safe space for learning together in some of these challenging topics. A shared understanding of the interconnectedness between racial equity and the food system. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. A shared understanding for how we can evaluate, prioritize, and co-create equitable organizations. And a clear call to action for how all of us as participants can move forward with this work individually and in our organizations. And I participated basically for my own individual education and the racial equity challenge that the New Hampshire Food Alliance helped spread over, normally it's done within 21 days through Food Solutions New England. We as a group of New Hampshire food system workers, guided by New Hampshire Food Alliance, broke that up and looked at it week by week for 21 weeks. And I realized myself that it was really a self-education. Before I go to the organization or we make a statement or we try to do something we aren't educated about, a couple people on our team, we were like, let's just dive in and learn a little bit about ourselves. So we might, or wherever you're at in the learning process, it might just be an individual thing to start. And I think that that's probably the best way to begin before trying to take on more than you can chew or make it something bigger than that. That being said, all of us working in the food system, racial equity is intimately tied to the food system. There are a lot of examples of how there is racial inequity espoused through our food systems. One area of that is land use and land ownership. Black Americans owning, 1% or less of land, while there's 13.4% Black Americans in the United States, less than 2% of them are farm owners. while at the same time, over 80% of our farm laborers are Black Americans, people of color, Indigenous Americans. So that's a severe inequity there. Not to mention across the board, lower income, fewer benefits. On the other side of it, there's the food access bit. So communities of color, Indigenous communities are more likely to have less access to nutritious foods grown locally. It's the statistic for that is Black families are 2.5 times more likely, and Latinx families are 1.4 times more likely to live in a neighborhood that doesn't have a full service grocery store. So those are communities that are going to gas stations to find food. And that is evident in health concerns and diet-related health problems that have much higher rates in those communities, diabetes, heart disease. And it's a positive feedback cycle. So you don't have the money to buy the food, your health declines, and then you have even less energy or ability maybe to go to work and then buy healthy foods. So it's really a deep cycle there. And what we're trying to do is look at it from all angles, you know, food system workers and people who want to eat and access healthy local food. How do we create equity in those systems? And no matter where you are coming from today in your food system work, there's a channel that you can access to make sure that this is a lens that's applied to your work. And that's what we're going to kind of dig into here with some of our discussion.
Hanna. So Becky and Hanna, do you want to talk a little bit about how you are starting to do this work in your organization?
I'll go first. So I work at the Littleton Food Co-op, and this summer I personally just took a deep dive into learning about our nation's racial past. And went on podcasts, listened to a lot of podcasts. Seeing on White was very influential. In the fall, the cooperative, one of the consulting agencies that we use offered the Abolitionist Challenge. Abolitionists were people who, you know, were against slavery and really helped the slaves, you know, become more free, wanted to look at the systems that were oppressing them. So we took the Abolitionist Challenge for 6 months. There were 7 people on our board that took it, really learning, and I'm still learning about all the inequities and how our food system still is really not slavery based anymore, but somehow it feels like it's pretty close to it. And it's a long, long line of oppression and systems that we need to look at. And the good part is that we are looking at them. The other thing I'm doing in my work is just on the ground in a grocery store, is we're looking at companies within our store who is already at the table. How can we lift them up? Who isn't at our table? Let's ask them, ask for stories. To educate our consumers, our member owners, our community about this whole topic.
Thanks, Becky. And very, you know, similar in our work at the Kearsarge Food Hub, again, starting with individual education, not making performative claims, which felt enticing, right? All of this stuff kind of coming out with George Floyd last spring, which people have been looking at and working on for decades and decades, and realizing in our little pocket here in New Hampshire that we've had the privilege of not paying attention to a lot of this stuff. So in all of this education, we saw some great films. We saw Gather Together as a community just last week, which looks at, you know, food sovereignty for Native Americans and how we cut off their food supply through the past, you know, 400 years coming here, and how that's used to control a population, and on the flip side, how that can help a population or community heal and grow and take control back of themselves through that sovereignty. So like Becky, we're looking at whose voices aren't at the table. Not that it's our job to give them a voice, but it is our job to listen and to give space to everybody so that they can decide for themselves what kind of food system that they want to build. So we've incorporated the word food sovereignty into our mission now. The right to design a system within a community based on those people's needs, not the needs of the market, not the needs of the capitalist forces, but the needs of the people. And we started a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging committee, which is brand new. And we're just working through our mission, our objectives, and making it a team-wide, all the way from the highest leadership in our nonprofit, which is our board of directors, all the way down to all throughout the staff, making it a system-wide kind of lens, like we're talking about, an equity lens to all that we do. So I'm excited to learn how to take that work further here today with you all.
Thanks, Hanna. So at this point, I guess I'll just briefly say with the Food Alliance, if it's not clear at this point, our role we see as really helping food systems professionals like yourselves, people in the food systems, and just eaters, not just, but and eaters, ensure that we are talking about and working on racial equity in our work. So bringing people together, having conversations like this, doing the 21-week challenge that Hanna referenced. We also have a racial equity team, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So, you know, our role is really hoping to bring people together and start conversations. So I'm going to turn it over to Jermaine, who's going to walk us through some activities and conversation.
Very good. Well, thank you, everyone. And just kudos to you for completing the 21-week challenge. And hopefully it was impactful to you. There's a lot of information, a lot of resources out there for us to self-educate. And I'm very encouraged to see the resources that have been made available to all of you, and just that's just out there for us to research on our own. So we want to take that learning and move to action, right? Because awareness plus action equals change, right? So there's a bit that we have to self-educate and learn, but then it comes to a point where we try to think about how do we impact the spaces that we occupy. I love what you said, Hanna, about creating equity in our systems, because I think that's our big lever here. That's where we can have the most impact. There's something to be said about checking our own biases, checking our own attitudes, checking our own behaviors, and educating ourselves. But the biggest impact that we can have is if we look at the broader systems. Many people are not quite aware of this, but during the civil rights movement in the 60s, it wasn't necessarily about making people less racist, right? Although that would be a good thing. But what it was really about was, let's change the policies and the systems that make it equitable for all, right? Because that can withstand a racist attitude or racist behavior, right? If we have the right systems in place that protect most people from maybe personal attitudes. So for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to break you up into a breakout room where I want you to think about things that you can do, not only things that you can do to continue this journey personally, but how you can bring this back to your organization. And by the way, I definitely understand why it's important to educate yourself. We can't share what we don't have, right? We can't give what we haven't received. So educating and being up on what's going on is very, very important. But let's start to think about how we can impact the spaces that we occupy. And so to facilitate this small group, and the way we're going to really tap into the collective wisdom of this large group of 34 people or so is there's going to be a shared document link in the chat. So as you break out into your small groups, as you come up with ideas, if you can please click on that link and fill in whatever group you're in, fill in some of your ideas. Ideally, we want to share this document with the whole collective here. Again, I really believe in the collective wisdom of a group. We're just smarter together than we are individually. So let's tap into all of the brain power that's here on this call today. And then after 20 minutes, we'll get back, we'll highlight some thoughts, some suggestions. We'll maybe have a quick open conversation about it. And then, and of course, make this document available to you as well. So you're gonna see when you get into this document, there's some prompting questions that can help guide your brainstorming. And it's what actions do you plan to take yourself? What actions can you bring back to your organizations? and what resources might you need to help support you in this journey. So any questions about that? Does that make sense? Very good. And I'll be available to you, particularly at the end of your breakouts. If you have any questions where I can share some best practices with you, I'll be more than happy to do that. Sound good? Excellent. All right, so we'll see you in 20 minutes. My group, we probably had the best group, by the way, just to let you all know. But we had an awesome group and just some good ideas. And hopefully you found that time together very impactful as we shared and brainstormed some ways that we can really impact the spaces that we occupy. I quickly printed out our shared document that we're going to make available to you. But just some highlights, some ideas here is even the first comment, Food Connects, just working with BIPOC producers. Supplier diversity is very, very important. It's often a forgotten area of DE&I work. Sometimes we focus just on our spaces, which are very important, but also we can diversify our partners and companies that we partner with. So I think it's fantastic. Creating a strategic plan, just getting started. I want to just share something about that. Get started. Just start by starting. You don't know everything. It's going to feel a bit scary. You're not sure what to do. You don't have all the answers. And let me tell you a little secret. You're going to stumble. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to learn, but you got to start by starting. This is work that takes a lot of intention and a lot of effort. So start by starting. And I love how one of you said, let's just get started on this work, creating a plan. Set specific goals, I think, is very important as well. We tend to, the things that we value, we measure. And I'm sure in your line of work, there are things that you measure so that we can start to measure this work. Some other things that come up, making sure we have financial investment, train our leadership. By the way, typically when I see these initiatives fail, it's because leadership is not on board. So I think it's important that you make sure leadership is on the same page. 21 day a week racial equity challenge is a way that we can continue to raise awareness. Yeah, making culturally appropriate food more available. Just some great ideas here. Diversifying leadership. We had a very just great comment about really challenging this notion of fit as we try to diversify our teams. It's kind of this catch-all phrase that sometimes is code for excluding certain groups of people. So making sure even our hiring process are objective and structured, so we can get bias out of there. Just great ideas, and hopefully you will have this document and you can share some ideas. I think what happens now, right? Anytime we talk about this work, is really have to make a commitment from us. We have to make a commitment. We share that commitment. We're explicit about what we're trying to do here. We build in some accountability to this work as well. And that's how we're going to begin to move the needle here. But any thoughts or questions, one about the process and about your conversations, or any questions about just some ideas overall that we can talk through with one another with the remaining time we have together?
And you can feel free to put those in the chat too.
Please.
I wanted to mention something that Jeannie said that really struck me as something I kept saying and referring to, is the equity lens. And she pointed out that a lens is something that you can take off. So kind of switching that language to putting that at the core of what you're doing and baking it into your DNA and in your organization and in yourself, and making sure that it's not something that you can just choose to not do at any time.
I agree. From my experience, the organization and corporations who are excelling at this work, they really do make it a part of their culture. It's just who they are and how they operate. It is not a one-off check the box initiative. It is, we do this work because it's the best version of our organization when we embrace this work, and it's a part of our DNA. So Hannah, I 100% agree.
And does someone want to give some examples of what that means? Like, what does it mean to put this at the core of your work for those of us who may just be getting going? Anyone, you don't have to be one of the presenters. If you've got ideas, if you're doing this, feel free to jump in.
I know at the co-op, we, the co-op is organized with 7 principals. And I think that this might be the 8th principal. I mean, it's woven in there because our foundation are abolitionists. And so it's woven in there, but it seems like right now it needs to be maybe more heightened, more presented as not something separate, but we really need to look at this in every decision we make. In a grocery store, it's like, so who are we buying from? If we're helping with food access, are we meeting, you know, the individuals, the other individuals in our area? Who is not at our table? Who is at our table? How, you know, what are we missing? You know, it's asking those questions almost with every decision. Who's missing in this decision?
Another little example I would give is, you know, at every board meeting, you have a treasurer's report. At every board meeting, you should have an equity report. Some kind of, whether it's, you know, watching a 5-minute video from Brene Brown, or, you know, somebody reporting out on the 21-day equity challenge, or, you know, here's who's new at our table, as Becky mentioned, here's a group of folks that we hadn't really thought about before, and here they are. And so that's a little piece of the DNA. It's something that comes up every single board meeting as you're tracking what you're doing.
I think also to build it into your DNA, there's a lot of work to be done around internal organizational culture, especially if you're starting to think about really trying to hire more people of color. It's hard work and usually really benefits from outside facilitation. But if you want to hire more people of color, you need to make sure that it's a welcoming and a place where those people can come and thrive. And then you have those people who are working for you, who are helping you build this into your DNA, and you're not kind of working in a vacuum of white leadership.
Lauren, I think you make a good point. I've worked with organizations who invest a lot of money to try to bring in diversity, and they're paying very little attention to making sure the environment that they're walking into is one that's inclusive, where they feel that this is a place that they feel welcomed, valued, respected, and heard, and that they can thrive. So as we continue to think about diversity, and it may be a challenge to diversify our teams, but we can start today making sure when they get there, this is a place that they feel welcome, right? We can be inclusive no matter who's in our space, or making sure everyone in our space, no matter what their identities may be. But I think great point, Lauren. We got to get that right, or we're going to bring them in and they're not going to stay because they're not going to feel like this is a place that they belong.
How do you create that safe space? I mean, it's changing the culture in an organization. And so any ideas from the collective out there on how to create safe place for all the people that's already working there?
Well, I would say, and this is, I mean, I would say one thing is to, and it's so basic, is creating an environment where people can be critical, or people can offer up their own experience of why, you know, this is not working for me as an inclusive environment, and to actually hear it and to, you know, get to that deeper level of understanding our implicit biases. Sometimes the expertise of what we need to change is in-house with the people who are already there, and it's just listening to them, right?
Yeah.
Chris,
Totally
if I had to
agree.
answer that in one word, it would have been listen, right? Like that's it. It's open ears, which as soon as we start getting into power dynamics in organizations, it gets very difficult to do.
I agree. And I think we have to acknowledge we have blind spots. There's just things we won't see, we won't notice until we ask people who are on the other side of that experience. And we have to be open and willing to listen to them and engage with them. Who better to tell us if we have a welcoming environment than the people in that environment, itself. Any other ideas on how to do this well?
In my organization, something that we are working on is because we produce so many flyers and we produce so much printed material that we distribute in the community to promote our programs. We've been having more conversations about the language that we use to promote our message and whether that language is taking into account the person who's actually going to receive it, and looking at the language that we use through an equity lens. So like so much of what we end up doing is like making all these printed things, but if someone really just thinking about what happens when somebody reads this and what message is that actually sending, kind of being willing to change those materials every round, right? And not feeling stuck and not feeling like we need to keep using the same exact wording because that's consistent, but rather saying this is a dynamic and changing landscape and we want to be responsive to the community. And so I think that we've all accepted that we may not get it exactly right, like you said, but that we can continually improve those materials. That's been a big one.
Yeah.
Going off of that a little bit, just being willing to poke holes in everything to the very heart of it. We've been working on a strategic planning process and an organization of about 17 people, and building out our values. We decided we wanted to have them yesterday, but we're going to take the whole year and we're bringing new people into the team and we're going to co-create those values together. And then kind of based on some stuff we learned from Brene Brown and her team, really map out the specific behaviors that are associated to those values, not just a values list, but in building the culture, these are the specific behaviors that help fulfill those values. Like we don't talk to people after a meeting and gossip. Like we talk to each other, not behind each other's backs, and have those uncomfortable conversations, which hopefully will be a co-creative experience in a less top-down way, but a more horizontal way.
I know throughout co-op world nationally, we are starting to see our ins report, because the board hires the general manager and evaluates them, that some of those things that they will be evaluating on, there's starting to be new language based on equity, based on these things that we're talking about, actionable steps that the board will want to see the general manager who manages the store to do.
I think we have about a minute left, so I'll close this section with this. So I like simple frameworks as I think about where do I go from here. Jamar Tisby in his book, The Color of Compromise, and this is about racial equity, but we can apply this to any equity. And he gives this simple framework of ARC, A-R-C. And he says there's work to be done on continuing to raise our awareness. A is awareness. So how do we do that? Build relationships, right? So the more exposure that we get, the broader our perspective is. Unfortunately, sometimes we're in our little bubble, particularly in this part of the country. We're just not a very diverse area. So we have to be more intentional about the relationships that we build. And then C is commitment. So awareness, relationships, commitment. Like what type of commitments are we going to make to do better at this work? So I want to encourage you that this is good work to be done, is work worth doing, obviously, but that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, right? It's going to take some time. It doesn't mean there's not a sense of urgency, but we want to, it didn't take us 2 weeks to get here. It's not going to take us 2 weeks to get out of this, what we're in right now when it comes to this, right? So this is a long-term commitment that we have to make. So I applaud you all for putting in the work so far, but there's so much work to be done, and I just encourage you to continue to do that. And if I can help you in your journey in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to share resources, share ideas, or even be a thought partner for you as you head out on this journey. Sound good?
Thanks, Jermaine.
Excellent, my pleasure.
So Jeannie Holt is with us, and she helped to develop a toolkit for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and she's going to share that with us, and we'll have an opportunity to ask her some questions about that as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. I'm a board member of the American Public Health Association, and the American Public Health Association, along with a lot of state public health associations and many other entities, have declared racism to be a public health crisis. And it's across the board, and at every level we need to be working on equity and anti-racism. Thank you for putting the toolkit up there in the chat, Jennifer. So this toolkit was really designed for small nonprofits. When we were looking around at what was available out there, there was a lot. There are toolkits and assessments for governmental entities and for big organizations that have a lot of staff, although as Daniel pointed out, even with big organizations, you still have to have money to do the work. But we didn't find anything for small organizations, small nonprofits in particular, where you have either a working board or you have a board and say 3 or 4 staff members. And so we designed the toolkit specifically to guide small nonprofits as they work to integrate equity, diversity, and inclusion best practices into their governance and their organizational structure. The toolkit is 5 assessments. So there's an assessment on governance, mission-driven programs, partnerships, communications, and advocacy. Those are the 5 areas. And each of the assessments then encourages your organization to kind of look at the practices and identify needs within that domain, identify areas for improvement. And then at the end of each domain, there is a list of some tools and resources that can get you started. You know, if any of you have searched for equity on the internet, it's hundreds of thousands of links that, you know, how do you, so we sorted through them a bit to pick the ones that we felt were the most useful for a small nonprofit board getting started. The goal, as I mentioned in my small group, the goal is to make equity part of your DNA. So if you think about DNA, it becomes evident in everything, in the color of your eyes, in the shape of your mouth, in the way your voice sounds. And that's what we want equity to be for your organization. It should be manifest in everything that you do. It's a journey. It's an ongoing process. Dr. Kamara Jones says equity is a process, not just an outcome. And so as an organization, this toolkit allows you to focus and be committed, but you can keep coming back to it and you can keep using it again to say, where are we now? What's the next thing that we need to work on? And revisit it on a regular basis. So I'm open for questions. If folks have anything they would like to know about the toolkit.
Thanks, Jeannie. And I would add, as people are thinking of questions, if you have experience with something like this or other resources that you think would be useful, feel free to add those to the chat as well.
And I would also offer, as Jermaine did, to be, you know, a facilitator or a thought partner as you're working on this. I'll put my contact information in the chat. The one thing I will say is if you use the toolkit, there is a link to a short evaluation survey. We expect this to be an ongoing process where we update the toolkit and refine it and revise it as we hear from people who are using it. So we would really, really appreciate it if you use it, that you just go in and fill that out so that we can keep making it a better and better tool for folks.
Thanks so much, Jeannie.
Jeannie, can I just say, I had a chance to preview this toolkit before today's session, and it's absolutely phenomenal. You and your team did a fantastic job, and sometimes these frameworks help us tremendously in driving conversations within our organization. So kudos to you, nice work.
Thank you, Jermaine. I appreciate that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So Becky is going to share with us some calls to action that we can do moving forward. And Becky, I'll put the link in the chat to you so that you have those words in front of you if you need them. Before we turn it over.
That was on our agenda, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I just put the link in the chat, Becky.
All right. Well, let me get to it. I think I already have it. Just a second. Chat amongst yourselves.
And while she's getting ready for that, I'll just let you know that this session ends at 12:45, and then we have a break before 1:15 for our closing for the statewide gathering. So we are going to hear closing words and call to action from Evan Mallett. He's a chef and owner of the Black Trumpet. And then we'll have a brief wrap up. So that's just another 45-minute session to close out our annual statewide gathering.
So the call to action: how can participants build on the innovative responses to COVID-19 as we develop in our network and food system at large? Assess where you are and your organization and where your organization is in understanding and centering racial equity. So Jeannie's toolkit would be really great. And there's a lot of other resources out there that you can put in the chat if you know of one. Join the FSNE 21-day Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge. It's coming up in April, I believe. That is an awesome tool. If you can create a partner to go over that, or a small group, that's really wonderful, because that really helps. It really helps to have a partner to talk to as these ideas and these thoughts come up. Join the New Hampshire Food Alliance Racial Equity Team. Email Jennifer. We have some open space, and we always have micro learning opportunities like those 21-week Racial Equity Challenge that we did, which was so beneficial. And like I said before, find a thought partner. It can be a powerful tool to help you unpack this work. And I don't know about anybody else, but this work has brought up a lot of very interesting experiences and feelings, and yeah.
Thanks, Becky. So with that, thank you so much for joining this session and the rest of the statewide gathering. If you have any questions or thoughts you want to share, we'll stay on for a few minutes longer. But otherwise, we hope to see you back at 1:15 and certainly hear from you moving forward. Thanks, everybody.